All right, so today we're diving deep into what's basically a dark fable. Think of it like a clinical case file, a really intense one, that documents a soul's journey right into the abyss. Now, we're not here to judge. Our job is just to observe, to really look at the architecture of a consciousness that's completely lost its way.
So where do we even begin? Well, our observation kicks off with this pretty bleak assessment of the human condition. The source material doesn't paint a rosy picture. It frames civilization not as some thriving, growing thing, but as a crime scene of profound spiritual sickness. It's a place filled with these empty, performative rituals, all being acted out for a sky that just isn't listening.
You know, the source material gives us this fascinating figure called the Red Spectre, and its mission? It isn't about fighting a battle. Nope. It's about a diagnosis, a clinical observation. So, looking through the Spectre's eyes, our goal is to really understand the pathology here, that deep-seated illness that traps a soul in this endless loop, you know? A loop that stops any real growth in its tracks.
Okay, first things first. In any clinical procedure, what do? You diagnose the problem, and in this case, the source material has a name for this particular pathology, the gilded cage. It's this beautiful, shiny, self-imposed prison of modern life.
And right at the heart of this diagnosis is something called the Pharisees' paradox. It's a direct nod to, people who put on this big show of virtue in public while they're just rotting away on the inside. It's describing this totally hollow existence where these individuals, they're called stargazers, are just desperately manufacturing meaning, staring up at an empty, uncaring void. And why? All to hide from the raw agony of just being. It's basically a pretty facade slapped on top of a terminal sickness.
And this is where you can really see that contrast, right? The outward appearance versus what's really going on underneath. That vibrant neon glow of the city, that's just a mask for the rot inside. And all those comforting rituals, this so-called abbey of safety, well, it turns out those are the very bars of the gilded cage. So, the diagnosis is in. Now comes the procedure, the plan to dismantle this whole facade. But this isn't your standard therapy session. Oh no, it requires a very specific and, let's be honest, a completely terrifying psychological tool.
So what's the main tool in the toolbox here? It's the pressure of mortality, that relentless, creeping, existential dread that time is running out. See, the ego loves to build its defenses on this illusion that we have forever. This procedure, it's designed to take a hammer to that illusion and shatter it into a million pieces.
And here we get this just classic piece of Gothic imagery, the ebony clock tower. Normally, you think of a clock tower as a symbol of order, of a town's rhythm, right? Well, here, it gets weaponized. It's turned into this constant ticking reminder of inevitable decay. It takes the familiar comfort of reality, what the text calls the homely, and twists it into something terrifyingly strange and unfamiliar.
And this whole unmaking process is incredibly systematic. It's cold. It's clinical. The entire thing is designed to methodically strip away every single defense, every single carefully constructed lie the ego tells itself to feel safe. The goal? To force the subject to finally confront everything they've buried deep down inside.
Okay, so once all those external illusions are shattered, the procedure has to turn inward. The next step is a big one, confronting the source of the self-deception. We're going right to the internal engine of the sickness itself.
So, what exactly is this verdant dragon? This is a really crucial point. We're not talking about some external monster you have to slay. No, it's a reflection. It's a mirror. It holds the key to the whole condition because, well, it is the patient's hidden, buried self.
And this is where things get really interesting, because facing this dragon is where the story brilliantly mashes up two different worlds, Greek Socratic inquiry and pure Gothic horror. It's designed to force this moment of just agonizing, blinding clarity. It's all about preparing the subject for that final intervention by making them see themselves, truly see themselves, with absolutely no filters. Now that moment of clarity, it leads directly to the core philosophical intervention of this whole process. This is where the ego itself, your very sense of I, is treated as a terminal sickness. It's called the fever of the soul, and it requires a cure that is radical and maybe even final.
And this slide really lays out the central conflict beautifully. It's a clash of two fundamental logics. On one side, you've got the Greek ideal of the agon, that noble struggle for a sovereign life. That's the logic of one. But on the other side, you have the Gothic abyss,
this pull toward the silent, peaceful equilibrium of nothingness. That's the logic of zero.
So, this logic of zero, what is it really? It's basically the clinical personification of the death instinct, what Freud famously called thanatos. It's this deep, unconscious, entropic pull to return the soul to peace. And it frames total erasure not as something to be feared, but as the ultimate therapeutic release. It's a way to go back to a state before all the stress and tension of existence ever even started.
So after all that pressure, all that intense analysis, it all culminates in a final prognosis. But here's the twist. It's not presented like a sentence you have to endure. It's presented as a gift. The Crimson Gift. A choice.
So what's the choice? The subject, now completely stripped of every last illusion, has to face what's called their original catastrophe. Think of it as the sum total of all their pain and failures. And right here, at this metaphorical hourglass of eternal becoming, they have to make the most definitive choice of their entire existence.
So, path number 1 is to surrender. You can accept the midwife of the abyss and just embrace that profound, silent peace of non-being. This is the logic of zero in action, the grand silence offered up as a kind of final mercy.
But then there's the other path, the path of sovereignty. To fight, this is choosing the logic of one. And what does that mean? It means taking total ownership of all that pain, embracing the very fire that was meant to destroy you and transforming it into a new, brilliant, lightning-like existence. It means, ultimately, becoming your own cure.
And so, the case concludes, not with a final, neat answer, but with this haunting possibility of transformation. So what are we supposed to take away from all this? The clinical procedure just ends. And it leaves us wrestling with this huge, haunting question. Do you have to descend into the shadow of the abyss to truly see the light of logic? In the end, it seems the choice itself is the only thing that really matters.